So I would like to introduce our guests. We have 3 guests from the American Indian Community Center. Linda Lauch is the executive director of the American Indian Community Center, and she was born in Spokane on the Indian Reservation. And while executive director, she has increased the budget by over 60% and increased staff from 12 to 19%, or 12 to 19, sorry. Karen Stratton was born and raised in Spokane. She was a city employee who was appointed to the city council in 2014 and served 10 years representing Northwest Spokane. Her father served on the city council and her mother in the state legislature. And Stephanie Sijohn is from the Latah village in Alaska. She has 4 children and has been promoted from receptionist to assistant to the director. So please welcome our guests.
I had to look to see if it was morning or afternoon. Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Lauch. I'm the executive director of the American Indian Community Center. And in the language of my ancestors, the Spokane tribal people would say, "Stemas ba'us," which means what is on your heart. And what is on my heart today is gratitude, or lemlemsh, which means thank you. I appreciate the opportunity for us to come and share our story and our hopes for the future. For many years, the Indian Center was the best kept secret in Spokane, and we're trying very hard to change that. And one of the ways that we're doing that is we hired Karen Stratton to be our capital campaign manager and help us raise funds for a building of our own. I was thinking during the first service that I've been at this church one other time, and that was for a funeral. Because the Indian Center doesn't have a space big enough for a tribal funeral, your church was gracious enough to allow the Fox family to come and celebrate their son's life. And I was here for that. As anybody that knew about that event, it was standing room only. People came from all over. So I just really appreciate you guys letting us come and talk to you this morning, and thank you for your partnership in the past as well. I'm going to introduce Karen Stratton.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. A little bit about how I got involved. First of all, I'm just starting my 4th week on the job, so go easy on me. I did serve on the city council for 10 years, and the last few years were very gratifying for me because I worked on projects that I felt were important, not only to the community, but to the American Indian community. And that first project was changing government way, or we did the Wistox way. I forget, George Wright Drive, sorry. He was out of my mind once we changed the signs. I absolutely was so excited to be part of that and to work with the city, and was so proud of the city that they worked so quickly. That project sat on the Plan Commission for probably 10 years at the bottom of the list. And that just means they were waiting for people to have the time, for employees to have the time to do it. And one phone call, it was during the George Floyd incident, and it was like, we've got to do this because this is first and foremost in people's minds. We've got to do this here. And so I'm very, very proud of the city for that. The second one was working with Linda and her team on bringing a new permanent community center to the American Indians here in the city of Spokane, and not just for them, but for everybody in Spokane. The reason it's near and dear to my heart is that my mother was Lois Stratton, and she was the first Native American who was elected to the legislature, and she served in the Senate and the House. And I was told it's probably smart for me to say she was a Democrat. So we got that straight. But I remember we spent our weekends growing up where my mom grew up in Ford. And I loved my grandparents. I loved the farm. I loved that life. But I always came back to Spokane. And we didn't talk about it much. When I was getting ready to be confirmed in one of my Catholic schools, I chose my grandmother's name. Her name was Anna Bernadette, so I took Bernadette. And my grandma couldn't be here for the service, for the Mass, because she didn't feel comfortable in Spokane. She didn't feel like she belonged, and she didn't feel safe. And so growing up with that, it just kind of connected as I got older and could make a difference in the community, working with these two fine ladies, that we could make a difference. And so now I've put aside the politics and all of that, and I'm doing something that's important to me, that's in my heart and in my family, and it feels wonderful. So if I don't seem very good at this, it's just because I haven't done it very long, but I'm gonna be really good at it soon. We're gonna start with the presentation, PowerPoint, and we can go to the first slide just to remind everybody of the Relocation Act. That was when people were moved away from the reservations with the promises that they were going to get training and education and housing and all of that. We took them off the reservations. My grandmother lived her whole life on the Spokane reservation until she had to come to Spokane for more services as she was dying, but her whole life was spent. And in fact, I remember today in a conversation with somebody that it wasn't until recently I found out that in back of my grandparents' homestead on the reservation was a uranium mine. And they never talked about it. And I remember just, 3 or 4 years ago, somebody coming up to me saying, yeah, that's your grandma's land and that's where it's at. So the things that come up are kind of astounding. Next slide. And just a little bit of history. We did keep as we talked about this slide presentation, the kill the Indian to save the man. I'm sure we've all heard that before. That was Richard Henry Pratt, who was an Army officer who developed the first off-reservation Indian boarding school. And I know we've heard a lot about Indian boarding schools. But just historically, it's a pretty sad reflection. More than 100 tribes were terminated across the United States, and 2.5 million acres were confiscated. It is estimated that between the 1950s and the 1980s, as many as 750,000 Native Americans migrated to cities. So we have a lot of folks living here that still have reservations that they remember and that they connect with, but they're living here in the city of Spokane. Next slide. So the urban Indians today, 74% of all Indians today live in urban areas. Urban Indians experience same conditions as reservation-based Indians without the resources. So 1% of Indian health dollars go to urban Indians. The rest go to the ones on the reservation. Urban Indian poverty rate is 20.7% versus 12.7% for non-Indians. And the American Indian and the Alaskan Native community was most severely impacted by the pandemic. American Indians and Alaskan Natives experience the highest rates of substance disorder, and many decide to end their lives because of that. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Sijohn. She's much smarter than I am. She's been there a lot longer than I have, and she's going to talk about services.
I'll borrow that from
Yeah.
you. Okay, well, the Indian Center, like they said, was founded in 1967. I have a very long history with the Indian Center. Back in the 90s, my mother was she was deep into alcoholism. She was pretty far gone, and then she found the Indian Center, and she was able to go to AA meetings And then she was sober for 11 years. So it was really great. That's why it was really crazy when I got the job at the Indian Center. My mom was like, where do you work? And I told her, and she's like, I got all my sobriety chips from there. And so it was just a really good history of, you know, the Indian Center does bring really great changes to people's lives, not just natives, but everybody. But the Indian Center, it does represent more than 300 American Indian tribes and Alaska Native villages, and including the 29 tribes in Washington. And we serve close to 5,500 clients each year. It does grow. Back in 21 to 23, it was pretty big because we had housing programs due to COVID, and we actually kept close to 1,900 families housed through the pandemic. And then, let's see, and we assist all clients that come to the center, whether, you know, they're Native or not. We try to, whatever barriers they're coming in with, we want to try to make sure that they're not leaving, you know, without anything, because sometimes we are the last resort for them. And then, oh, this is a biggie. The Indian Center has moved 11 times. I've only moved once, and I absolutely hated it. But us moving to our new location, Linda knows, it felt like home to us. Next slide. Okay. So this whole map represents Spokane as the hub for all Native tribes passing through. We make sure that we have services and resources available to them, especially people that do come to Spokane, Native people that do come to Spokane to go to work or school, we try to fill their needs. And also, we have the largest population of American Indian people between Seattle and Minneapolis. And this map is courtesy of the EW Urban and Regional Planning Department, which was done by our board member, Margot Hill, and her students. They gratefully gave us this map of showing how many different tribes we do help within the Spokane area. And then next slide. So the Indian Center has two very specific programs that are for Natives and descendants only. The first one is our Workforce Employment and Training Program, which helps our clients, you know, going to work, looking for work, or trying to go to school to get certificates, and, you know, it helps them with the barriers that they're running into. So say they need, you know, gas to get to work. We could, you know, as long as they're eligible, possibly help them with getting that gas, getting them a bus pass, getting them interview clothes if they're going to job interviews. And then with schooling as well, we could help them, you know, possibly with their books, their tuition, you know, just little things like that's a barrier for them. Also, our care coordination program, which is fairly new, but a lot of the staff there are pretty well trained in it, because we help clients every day with every need. but it's a new one where we're gonna help them with housing resources, job resources, even health-related needs. And then also our family services program, they do the central intake for us. And they assess the needs of the client, refer them to the programs within the center if they're eligible. If not, we refer out to other organizations. And then our Good Heart Behavioral Health, it is a substance abuse outpatient program. They hold groups every day. They do assessments in the afternoon. It's open to everybody. It's very traditional. And then there's also our food bank, which it's getting harder and harder to feed our community with the amount of food we get every week. Some days we could be open for 2 to 3 days. Some days we could only be open once because the need out there is so great. And yeah, they could see possibly 30, 40 people in one day and we'll be completely out of food. And then our other program, or last program, is our Indian Child Welfare Program. That is another Native-based program. We actually have 3 programs in one for Indian Child Welfare, and we actually do have 2 BIA grants for that. And then I think the next is for Miss Karen.
So here is the vision for the future. Here's where we're kind of at now. There was a gathering, a meeting of Native Americans held in 2021 and 2022 with the staff from the Spokane Urban Indian Community. And they talked and were asked to identify the highest priority for that population, their population. And it was definitely a permanent home for the American Indian Community Center. That was the priority, and that's what the goal is. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the coolest, because when I was on city council, we decided that, okay, they're right, it needs to be access to the river. If we're going to do this and we're going big, it needs to be by the river. The Spokane tribe traded on the banks of the Spokane River, so we have to make that happen. And the Spokane Parks Department and the Park Board were absolutely amazing in this process. Very respectful. They met with us when we needed to. I'm still on the council at the time, so I kind of have to create a balance, but we are going for it. And we realized about 3/4 of the way through it that so were they. They were just as excited, and it meant just as much to them as it did to us. So basically right now we're working on a lease that will be probably start out as a 57-year lease for the center, and it'll probably be that $1 a year lease payment, and then it would be re-upped after 57 years. So that's in the works. But, so here's the location. It's, if you're going down to Highbridge Park on Riverside, it's on the corner of like Riverside and A Street, near the dog park. I think the dog park is up. Yep, okay. So the bus route there's a bus route every 20 to 30, or let's see, every 30 minutes, which is great for people that don't drive. There's lots of parking, and there's lots of opportunities for the development of Highbridge Park, including native interpretation and site access to the Spokane River. And what's happened since this slide presentation was created, we've met with the director of the Parks Department. They're meeting with SPS, Spokane Public Schools, and they're talking about that area down there and what kind of programs could be collaborated between the American Indian Community Center and the schools. So that's very, very exciting. There'll also be, we've talked about space for powwows and for other events down there. So if you go to the next slide. So this is a historical slide. I love all the the old pictures if you can see them. But really, the Spokane River is where it's at. It's the gathering site for the people of Spokane, the Spokane tribe. And that's where they did their salmon, where they traded, where they fished. And the city of Spokane is named after the Spokane tribe of Indians. So we wanted to put that in there because that's great, great history there. The next slide. So the vision for the space will be 25,000 square feet, including a gathering place for community meetings, community indoor and outdoor activities, traditional tribal ceremonies, tribal funerals, and special events. What's good about this is I used to be on the tribe. If any of you remember, Mary Verner was the mayor a few years back. I worked for Mary, and I used to help her try and plan that powwow in Riverfront Park. And I remember back in the day thinking, man, we need a different place for the powwow. This is just, it's too much going on in Riverfront Park. This would be so perfect to have some powwows, powwow space there where people can come in and enjoy a powwow. And even the tribal funerals. We have so many tribal people that live here, but their reservations are miles away, hundreds of miles away. And if they pass, or if a family members pass, and if they want a tribal ceremony, they've got to go back to their reservations. So that would be a great service. Expanded behavioral health offerings, including primary care for individuals experiencing substance disorders, the food bank again, and ongoing service delivery. And I will add that we have the last part of my council days was spent meeting with those neighborhoods surrounding this area to make sure the neighborhoods understood what was going on and that there could be possible partnerships there as well. And we really had nothing but positive feedback from people who, once they understood what the project was, they were excited to know about it and to look forward to watching it come to fruition. Next slide. So here's the campaign snapshot, 25,000 square feet. The total amount that we need to raise is $16,500,000. It will again be a gathering place for the urban Native community and its neighbors. It's located in Highbridge Park on Latah Creek, adjacent to the Spokane River. And we'll talk about project or progress made to date. Next slide. Again, we secured land from the Parks Department. There was a committee that was formed between the city, the parks, AICC, and the Spokane Alliance to kind of keep each other, keep ideas flowing and keep each other updated of where we're at. We have the interest by the community to develop financial institutions in new market tax credit. We're going through that process right now. Capital campaign manager identified and hired, and I'm glad it's 4 weeks. I haven't been fired yet. That's good. We had a state appropriation of, I'll step back here. We all went to Olympia to lobby, which none of us had ever lobbied before in our lives. And we had great people with us and showed us around. And at one point, we had one of our local legislators say, yes, this is a great project, but you guys are only going to get probably $250,000. And we thought about it and thought that's not going to bum us out. So we went around, spent the whole day meeting with people and talking. Weeks later, we got a phone call. We got $1 million from the state budget. So that tells us there's support, and they liked what we were showing them. We also got a $300,000 donation from Empire Health Foundation. We got $150,000 granted from the state for planning and design. And we're getting support from across the community. We're getting lots of positive responses, and so that's a really good thing. Next slide. So here's our path to success. We're working on that new market tax credit for $2,250,000. We're looking at a state appropriation of $3 million, some federal resource money coming at $4 million, and then the capital campaign needs to raise $7,250,000. I'm going to be really busy. So feel very sorry for me if you know people with lots of money. Send them my way. And that's it. We appreciate being here. We'll stick around. If you have questions, we can talk, but just wanted to get the word out and let people know what we're doing, and let you know that this is something that comes from the heart, and it feels so good. We're not going to stop till we're done, until we have that center up and running. Thank you.